I was wondering too, in reference to power at the voting booth. I'm sure you've heard that Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are primary challenging Joe Biden. I was at RFK Jr.'s announcement here in Boston recently covering that event. And it was really interesting to me because I heard some of Bernie's message there in his speech where he called out corruption, but I felt like he went a little bit further. He called out mainstream media. He said the media is the problem. Let me tell you why. He called out the CIA. He was willing to call out this issue with Russia and Ukraine. I thought he had pretty much the best response in reference to Russia and Ukraine and what's really happening. And here's my problem. Someone who is a Kennedy, knowing what happened to his dad, knowing what happened to his uncle, and how the federal government basically took them out, I do not understand why he believes that running through the Democratic Party is the right thing to do. And I feel like someone with his message, because I feel it's further than when what Bernie did in reference to the people he's calling out. I feel like you would think that he would know.
It's not that much further. I mean, I listened to that talk, and it was littered with American goodness and American exceptionalism and the founding fathers and the sanctity of the Constitution, and that's myth. The founding oligarchs, almost all slaveholders, white men, of course, of our country, hated, and that's in the Federalist Papers, they were terrified of direct democracy and imposed all sorts of mechanisms to shut out, and not just African Americans, Native Americans, and women, all of which were shut out, but even men without property. So, as Howard Zinn points out, all of the spaces in our democracy, expansion of our democracy, has been paid for with blood. The blood of abolitionists, the blood of suffragists, the blood of labor organizers. We had the bloodiest labor wars of any industrialized country. Been hundreds of American workers were murdered, thousands were blacklisted, injured. I mean, with the gun thugs and the state militias and the National Guard and all this. So he played to that myth. I found he was kind of gloves off with the Democratic Party. He did criticize a little bit at the end Biden's economic policies, but again, like Bernie, very tepidly. And the Democrats have been full partners in the most devastating measures that have really cast the poor, and working men and women into real misery. I mean, the crime in the Clinton administration of destroying the welfare system. And 70% of the original recipients under the old welfare system were children. The NAFTA, which was probably the greatest betrayal of the American working class since the Taft-Hartley League, that was all Democrats. So, and what did Obama do? I mean, he used the mandate he had been given to take on Wall Street to get all of Jamie Dimon and all these Wall Street tycoons in the White House and give them everything they want. So I found that the big question is he going to take the loyalty oath? I mean, the Democratic Party demands a loyalty oath. And it means that you will support whoever the nominee is. That's Bernie in both cases went out and campaigned for first Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden. And so is he going to take that loyalty oath? It's very hard to run as an independent. I worked for Nader. I was Nader's speechwriter because they make it especially the Democratic Party, if you come from the left, they make it very, very hard to get on the ballot. Ballot access is really, and they put up so many hurdles. And Biden's such a weak candidate; they're going to be vicious towards Kennedy. And you already saw it with the New York Times profile, focused exclusively on his very controversial positions on vaccines and mandates. But it was really a hit piece. I mean, it was brutal. And I listened. You were there, but I listened to the whole thing. There were all sorts of other issues: the environment, and as you mentioned, the security state and corporate power and all this kind of stuff, and the war in Ukraine, again, as you point out, was all there. That wasn't in the Times story. So he's going to get hit. He's going to get, the goal will be to turn him into a figure of ridicule because Biden is such a weak candidate. And remember, the DNC has already announced that they back Biden, and the Democratic Party has already said there won't be any. They won't have any debates.
Right, right. So why do you think he's choosing to? And I'm here in Massachusetts, and I know a lot of people like the Kennedys, but I just feel like the days of assuming that you can just win because you have that Kennedy last name
Yeah,
are gone.
yeah. He's never held elective office, so
Right.
it's totally riding on the name. Yeah, I hope it's gone. I'm not because I am against his candidacy, but I don't believe in this kind of native aristocracy that passes power from one generation to the next, as the Bushes did and the Kennedys did. If we go back to Joe Kennedy, now, after the third generation didn't do so well.
Right.
But yes, but I would be very surprised if he gets a lot of traction, just because the media, and it's already started immediately, is going to hammer him, and they'll play the fear factor. You can't vote for anyone but Biden because you're going to get Trump, and that's a scary thing because we may actually get Trump. But I would say it's the failure of the Democratic Party. I mean, the fact that anybody would poll even with Trump is a sign that they're a disaster as a candidate. But that's what they're going to pull. They're going to fight over that very narrow kind of contested middle, small segment of the voters could go either way. They're going to cater to them. But I didn't like his whole myth of America stuff. I mean, I just am waiting for the day that we outgrow that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's because it's just not true. And I'm sure
Right.
he knows it's not true. I mean, Americans are good people. Look, we have a lot of blood on our hands. I mean, we can just start with the 2 decades in the Middle East. Of course, I cover the Middle East for the New York Times, but we've never addressed the genocide of Native Americans. We've never confronted the Holocaust that we visited on African Americans, or at the very minimum, the need for reparations, the legitimate claim for reparations on the part of African Americans. So to fall back into that, we're such a great country in the Constitution, which was a constant theme of his speech, that I found a little difficult to swallow, to be honest.
I feel like he was trying to do both sides. That he's trying to both sides it. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, he talks about hearing the truth. He's going to speak the truth. Well, no, he didn't really speak the truth. I mean, if you speak the truth, you sound like Noam Chomsky.
Right. Like, how do you feel
or Cornel West?
Right. How do you feel about the anti-war sentiment? Because some people have contacted me since I did that coverage. People have contacted me from different political groups. I've had Republicans contact me and say they may actually break away this time just to support him because of the anti-war message. What do you feel about that? Do you feel like that's a message that could bring more people together, considering this war with Russia and Ukraine?
Well, Trump's peddling the same anti-war message, so there's no friction there with the Trump candidacy. Well, I mean, I think part of the reason that there's never a rational debate about Ukraine is because the justification for giving Ukraine, what is it now, $150 billion, is so thin. Yeah. So they don't want it questioned. But inevitably, there's going to be a kind of fatigue. I mean, it's 600,000 Americans are homeless. What is it? 9% of all children go to bed every night hungry. I mean, there is a question people legitimately ask: why, at a moment's notice, are these spigots of billions of dollars pumped? It's, of course, it's going to the arms manufacturers primarily. It's going to Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Halliburton, all these figures. But why? When meanwhile people are getting thrown off Medicaid, stimulus checks have ended. I mean, those are questions they don't want asked because it again, I think, totally exposes the priorities of the corporate state, which is primarily about domestic surveillance and oppression, militarized police, the largest prison system in the world, and endless war. I mean, that's about all they do now.